Pirkei Avos, chapter 6. We're still on the first one, and we're probably going to be here still for at least another week. That's pretty much what it looks like, because there's a lot of information. We're trying to break it down into bite-sized pieces. So let's review. Rabbi Meir taught us that the theme of this whole conversation is ha'oisek b'Torah lishma. That's what we're talking about. A person who invests in Torah learning, who toils in Torah learning, ba'at lishma. The reason that they're learning, or the motivation why they're learning, is lishma, for its sake. They're not learning Torah for personal reasons, ulterior motives. They're learning Torah for its sake. So he said right away that such a person is zoiche lidvarim harbe. Such a person will merit many things. Now, the first way that we read that, which is the most simple way to read it, zoiche lidvarim harbe, if you learn Torah for the right reasons, many good things come your way. That's what it sounds like, and then you expect a list. And there is a list, actually, right? Because you expect a list. Zoiche lidvarim harbe, that many things come your way. But in order to unpack today's piece, we're going to take a slightly different view of what dvarim harbe means. Okay? So does dvarim harbe mean many, many things on a list? Possibly. But there's another possibility. Dvarim harbe could also potentially mean different types, many different types of experiences that we get. And we touched on this briefly last week, because don't think, that's what he's telling us, don't think that a person learns Torah, and they learn Torah for the right reasons, so everything just falls into place, automatically. Right? Memela, as we say, you know, that things just happen of their own accord. Because that's not how life works. You know, somebody once said that life is the equivalent of trying to walk up the down escalator. Which means that if you stay in one position, you're going down. That's the only thing that happens memela. The only thing that happens automatically in life is decline. You don't have to put you don't have to put effort into decline. It just happens. Whereas if you want to grow, if you want to move in the right direction, if you want to have a meaningful personal development, that's not going to happen memela. Now, here we're not talking about memela. We're not talking about a person who does something without any effort. We're talking about oisek. That's a very strong word. It's a very proactive word. Oisek, a person who is engaged, who is toiling in Torah, and they're doing so lishma. They're doing so for the right reasons, which is a whole different avoid. It's a whole different investment in its own right. So we're certainly not describing over here somebody who's just coasting along and expecting things to fall into their laps. Yet, the impact that the Torah has on us is dvarim harbe. It impacts us in multiple ways. Some of the impact that the Torah has on us is as a result of the Torah. It's going to have that effect on us. So, for example, last week we learned that what happens when a person learns Torah is we become beloved to Hashem. Ohuv. That's what happens when you learn Torah, when you learn Torah for the right reasons. That's what happens. You become beloved to Hashem. The fact that you love God, that's what happens when you learn Torah for the right reasons. It helps cultivate a love for Hashem. And as we spoke about it last week, you can't really tell somebody how to feel, but you can tell somebody what they should do intellectually that's going to stimulate certain feelings. So yes, learning Torah Lishma is going to precipitate Oyev Samokim and Oyev Sabrius, that you'll love Hashem and that you'll love other beings. That's all true. But now we're getting to the next category of things that happen as a result of learning Torah, where it's not that the Torah waves a magic wand and turns a person into the most pristine human being that exists. The Torah is there to precipitate further growth. Let's put it this way. There's a prophecy, and I'm going to leave this for another conversation, but there's a prophecy about the time of Mashiach, that it says that the time of Mashiach are the days, Yomim, she'ein li bohem chayfetz. They are days that are not as enjoyable. I don't have the same chayfetz, the same desire for those days as now. Can you imagine? So everybody's looking forward to Mashiach. And then they tell us when Mashiach comes, it's Yomim she'ein li bohem chayfetz, the days that you don't really have any desire or any enjoyment. How's that possible? And the reason is because we won't have the same challenge that we have now. So to rob a person of challenge, to rob a person of resistance, to rob a person of the opportunity for growth is not a favor. And we won't turn this into a parenting share and about, you know, entitled children and spoiling our children, but it really does relate to this. So if the Torah would be that you learn Torah Lishma, and then everything else falls into place, would at that point become robotic. And then what's the point? So therefore, there are many results that come from learning Torah. Some of those results are natural and automatic. Beloved to Hashem, loving people. Some of it is that the Torah then puts us in a far better position to grow further. So that's the next segment of what we're going to be learning today, is the beginning of the things that the Torah makes us more predisposed to. Right? These are things that are not going to just happen, but the Torah will give us a head start. It will give us resources. It will turbo boost us on our particular journey. So the first two that we're going to read about is, he says, Malbashtoi anova v'yira. The Torah cloaks a person or dresses a person in anova. What's anova? Humility. Right? And yira is? See, this was a trick question, because the direct translation of the word yira is fear, although it's not. Pachad is fear. Yira is much more mature. Yira is a sense of overwhelm. It's a sense of awe. Awe is probably the best translation of the word yira. So, malbashto yanova b'yira, it cloaks or it clothes a person in humility and in awe of Hashem, obviously. Why do we use the expression clothes? Levush. What do you think the significance is of a levush, of clothing?
Put it on and you can't discard it.
Exactly. Clothing is not you. Yes, I know they say clothes maketh the man, right? But clothing is not you. And the best proof of this is going to happen in just under 3 weeks' time. Because everybody gets dressed up on Purim, yes? It doesn't mean that you actually are that thing. You know, people who dress up like a clown on Purim are probably depressed.
Yes.
That's why you dress up as a clown, right? Because what we wear is not necessarily an indicator of where we are or who we are. And that's why you can put on clothes and you can remove clothes. Not only remove clothes and hang them back up in your cupboard, you can give them away and you'll be fine. Trust me, you will. I know a lot of people don't believe this. But you can actually give them away. It's possible. Because at the end of the day, a levush is not you. A levush is something which is fairly superficial to you. So that's a little disturbing then, because if the Torah is giving us the opportunity to have access, because that's what it sounds like, it's giving us access to humility and it's giving us access to awe of Hashem, it is a little disturbing that it should be compared to clothing. So we've got to unpack this, right? We're going to unpack our clothes. So what does it mean that we're comparing this humility and this awe to clothing? So before we talk about the transient nature of clothing, let's talk about the more practical role of clothing. Why do we have clothes? Right? To cover, yes? Everybody's going to say that. To cover. And included in that is a certain level of protection. So whether it's protection against the elements, or whether it's actually protection. There's certain clothes that we wear for protection. For example, shoes. Wear your shoes because you don't know what's lying on the floor, so it protects you. I'm not talking about necessarily wearing a bulletproof vest. But clothing protects us in certain ways from the elements around us. Certainly protect us from the cold, or certain clothes are designed to cool us when it's hot. So it's to protect us from the elements. Okay, so that's what everybody tells us. The reason we wear clothes is in order to cover ourselves, otherwise it would be inappropriate, and in order to protect ourselves.
To give a certain impression.
Thank you. Because if it were true that the only reason that we wear clothes is to cover ourselves and to protect ourselves, we would pretty much all have one uniform that we all wore every single day. Right? But that's not why we wear clothes. I mean, it's definitely a big reason why we wear clothes, but possibly a bigger reason why we wear clothes is to allow us the opportunity to interact appropriately with society and make an impression that is appropriate to the circumstance. So, for example, I always tell the story where one year at a very big local fundraising event, which was a very formal event, and everybody was there in suits and ties and whatever the case is, and there was a raffle, and they pulled out the first prize, the top prize of the raffle, and it turns out that the recipients of the prize were not at this evening. So before announcing the prize, they got hold of them on the phone and they said, do me a favor, just pop in. just pop in. And they didn't suspect anything because they'd actually been involved in part of the preparation for this evening. So it's not like they realized, oh, why are you calling me? So they came to the evening in jeans and t-shirts, and then were called up to the stage in order to receive their prize. And you can imagine that they were obviously quite self-conscious in this very formal evening, and there they were in their jeans and their t-shirts. Because clothing is not just to make an impression, clothing is to contextualize ourselves in a particular environment. So you don't arrive to the gym wearing Shabbos clothes, right? And you don't arrive at Shabbos wearing gym clothes. So you don't go for a meeting, although COVID changed a lot of that. You know, people have really dressed down in the last few years. It was unheard of that a person would walk into a meeting in a private bank without a suit and tie. Whereas in today's world, it's quite common to wear a golf shirt. So things obviously change. But if it's appropriate to the context, and that's how we dress. We dress appropriately to suit the context within which we live. Now, what that indicates then on a spiritual level is that our spiritual clothes are what allow us to interact appropriately with the world. There's the who we are, there's the character that we have, there's the neshama that we have, which is even deeper than our character. But that is not necessarily what people confront when they engage with us. They confront the clothing that we wear, which means it is possible that a person has a very deep neshama, but they have very rough clothing. And when you engage with these people, you can't necessarily see the value and power of their neshama, because what you hit is the so-called superficial part, the layers on the outside, which might be a rough character, a brash personality, somebody who doesn't necessarily have finesse, and that blocks us from being able to access who they really are. So clothes are really important spiritually as well.
Can I say something? Look at the clothing of the Kohanim. How they were clothed for glory and splendor.
Yes, correct.
So the glory was from Hashem, and the splendor is what they were going to give.
Right, so the Kohanim...
So we, in effect, are representatives of Hashem, and therefore our clothing should be for a holy...
Correct, correct. But again, that's talking again about actual physical clothing. It's much more profoundly the case when we're dealing with spiritual clothing. So if we have to dress in a particular way that is appropriate in order to walk into shul, or to be a representative of Hashem, and the Shulchan Aruch talks about how we're supposed to dress so that we are in fact representing Hashem, it's much more so when we're using the clothing of who we are, what people encounter when they encounter us. And that's why we have all this, again, in halacha, in the same places that tell us how you're supposed to dress, also tells us that Divrei Chachamim benachas, that a person is supposed to speak in a way that is gentle, and that's what allows people to engage with us and to listen to what it is that we have to say. So one of the most important types of clothing that we wear is humility. Because there's an expression, I don't know if you've heard of it, I think it's a great expression, which goes, who you are is speaking so loudly that I can't hear what you have to say. And effectively what that means is, there are certain people who, the guy in our community likes to call them I specialists. I this, and I that, and I think, and I believe, and right? And they're so fixated on telling us about themselves that we can't really hear what they have to say. One of the most useful garments that a person can use in order to engage well with people is humility. Because think about it, we are all very open to listen to people who come across as humble. And this is not suggesting that we give the impression of being humble, because that doesn't help. There's nothing worse than faux humility, right? The person is trying to show you how humble they are. That doesn't help. That just sounds very inappropriate, and it sounds jarring. You know, like, well, what is with this person? Sometimes a person can be very direct. They can tell you exactly what they've done, what they've achieved, but it doesn't have a sense of arrogance associated with it. And other times we have people who duck and dive being associated with arrogance, and it comes across as being the most arrogant thing ever. In fact, I once heard from a very, very wise rabbi. He said that the greatest expression of arrogance is the person who tries to avoid being seen as arrogant. It's quite profound when you actually think about it. So malbashto yanava is not a bad thing. The fact that it cloaks us in a sense in humility, because that means that the person will be much more accessible, much more believable, much more lovable, because that's how it is when a person is humble. So the Torah creates a sense of humility. Who'd be the icon of this to represent for us the association between learning Torah Lishma and being humble? Obviously, Moshe. Moshe, the Torah tells us, is Anav Ma'od Mikol Adam Asher Al Pnei Ha'adama, that Moshe was the humblest person ever in the history of the world. And what was Moshe's full-time occupation? Torah Lishma. Even as the leader of the Jewish people, his primary occupation was teaching the Jewish people. We just saw it in the parasha this past week, right? How he shared everything multiple ways and multiple times with the whole community. So that's what Torah does for us. Malbashtoi Anavavira gives us the clothing of coming across as being humble. Not because that's what we're trying to portray, but that's who we really become. We actually become humble. A person who learns Torah Lishma will be a humble person. That person will stand in awe of Hashem. What's the difference between fear of Hashem and awe of Hashem? It's really important to know the difference. What is the difference between fear of Hashem and awe of Hashem? Here's the difference. The difference is the high school kids when the teacher's not in the class. So what happens when the teacher's not in the class?
Chaos.
Chaos, absolutely. Everybody's doing things that they should not be doing. Of course, the teacher believes that they're all doing their work, but they're actually doing whatever it is that they're doing. And then the teacher walks back into the class. There are two possible reactions for what could happen next. Once upon a time, for those people who remember such a thing, there were teachers who used to use the board ruler for discipline. Right? So when that teacher would walk into the class, what's the reaction of the kids? Fear. That doesn't mean that they respect this teacher. That doesn't mean that they ever want to see this teacher ever again the rest of their lives, but they're afraid of the teacher, and therefore they all kind of get back to their seats and they behave. Whereas there's another kind of teacher who walks into the room and the reaction of the students is awe. That means they're not afraid of the fact that they're going to get clapped by the teacher, but they're in awe of this person because they have so much respect for this person that they're actually self-conscious of misbehaving in that person's presence. That's Yira. In other words, Yira is a consciousness. It's a consciousness of Hashem. Remember there's that kids video and it's based on a Gemara, but there's that kids puppet video, I don't know if you ever saw it, it's called Somebody's Watching. You ever seen it? Somebody's Watching. Basically it's these two puppets, and the one is, he wants to pick some oranges from somebody's field, but he asks the other puppet to make sure that nobody's around, you know. So as he gets there, the other puppet says, somebody's watching, and he comes running back. And this goes back and forth a few times, and eventually he says, what do you want about? And the guy says, well, Hashem is always watching. So it's consciousness. Awe of Hashem is consciousness. In fact, I'll show you a very, very beautiful thought. Listen to this, very beautiful thought. So in this parasha we've just read, we know that there's the terrible, terrible decline of the Jewish people to the point of making a golden calf. What's most fascinating about the story is what happens next. The fact that people mess up is not a surprise to us. Sorry. But the fact of what happens next is what's most interesting. What happens after the golden calf? What's the very next chapter or section of the Torah, straight after the golden calf? Is what?
Moshe comes down.
Moshe
Comes down and breaks it.
Even before he goes down.
Oh, Hashem says...
What does Moshe do? He davens on behalf of the Jewish people and he asks for their forgiveness, and he goes down and he breaks the tablets and he smashes the calf and he does whatever he has to do, and then he goes back. Next chapter, right? That's all the chapter of the golden calf. Next chapter. What's the next section after that? Moshe asks Hashem for the greatest undertakings on behalf of the Jewish people ever. That's ridiculous, right? They've just committed the most horrific sin. And what's Moshe doing? Promise us, make sure that we're still going to be your chosen nation and give us access. And then Moshe says, show me your face. Right? Show me your face. At that point in time, he should be saying things like, just forgive the Jewish people and I'll be happy. No, show me your face. What does Hashem say? Nobody can see my face. Nobody can see my face. So therefore what? You'll see my back. Whatever that means. Front and back is not something that's relevant to Hashem, obviously, because those are very physical experiences. But nonetheless, Hashem says, watch, you'll see my back. And then Rashi tells us what that means. What does it mean to see Hashem's back? Kesher shel tefillin, the knot of his tefillin. Whatever that means, right? Because suddenly it makes more sense to us that you could see the knot of Hashem's tefillin than the fact you could see Hashem's back. I mean, they're both obviously completely metaphoric and non-literal, right? So what does it mean to see the knot of tefillin? What does it mean? So the explanation that he's given is beautiful. There's a Zohar that tells us that if you need to remember something, you tie a knot. Right? Yes. That helps you remember. That's what people used to do once upon a time. Before people had phones that used to beep with reminders that they could ignore. Before that, people used to tie something, right? They used to tie something, and that would remind them that they've got to do something. Of course, the problem is that you would then remember that you have to do something. You wouldn't remember what. But that's the okay. So a knot is supposed to help you remember. Why is that the story straight after the golden calf?
To remember Hashem.
Because you only do what's wrong when you forget. That's the message. That's what Hashem is showing him. That's what Hashem is showing Moshe. He says, you want to see me? This is how you see me. You've got to create knots. You've got to create things that you could use in order to remember me. And then, of course, the tefillin is one of those, because the Torah tells us tefillin is lezikaron bein einecha. It is a remembrance between your eyes. And then tzitzis is the other, because it says that you look at them and you remember. So on Shabbos, somebody at Shul asked me, so how come both of those mitzvahs are for men? What about for women? So I said, have you ever found a woman who forgets? So the point is that how does a person end up doing something which is against what Hashem wants? We forget. What is yira? Yira is consciousness. I cannot forget. Da lifnei mi'ata oimed, as you often see inside the shuls, but maybe it would be much more important if it was in front of our eyes, not just in front of the shul, to be conscious of where we are. And as the Yiddish expression goes, you have to know who you are, where you are, and in front of whom you are. So that's yira. That's what the Torah gives us. When a person is engaged in Torah, that makes them conscious. If a person is conscious of Hashem at all times, needless to say, they'll be humble, obviously. And needless to say, they'll be in a state of awe of Hashem, because it's not third person, it's not secondhand smoke. It's something that is real to us. That's what the Torah does. Yet, having said that, these are still garments. It means Hashem's not going to give us humility. He's not going to give us awe of Hashem. Rather, he'll give us the means to achieve. We still have to work. And that's a critical thing that people should remember, is that no matter how much Torah input we have in our lives, at the end of the day, Hashem will not do the work for us, because that defeats the purpose. He'll give us the clothes, he'll give us the tools, and then we have to consolidate. So if clothing is what we wear on the outside, our job is to absorb and digest it so it becomes part of us. So the Torah will give us this, so to speak, aura of humility and of awe of Hashem, and our job is to work with that to make it our reality, so that it's very much who we are, not just how we express ourselves to the world, or how we carry ourselves. Now
back to the tefillin and tzitzit, Shabbat supposed to give us that same feeling.
So Shabbos is ois, right? Shabbos is ois, not zikaron. It's a little different. Even though tefillin is also called an ois. But so Shabbos is the only thing we have about Shabbos is zeichen and ma'aseh bereishis. It reminds us of creation, but it's not this constant reminder of Hashem. So Shabbos plays a role, but not to the same extent. Right? Okay. So then he continues to say, Umachshartoi liois tzadik chosid yosher v'neman. So we've got to unpack a lot of vocabulary over here. First of all, let's start with the word machshartoi. Let's debunk for once and for all the meaning of the word kosher. What does kosher mean? Right? That's a better word, yes? Most people believe that kosher means
not eating meat and milk.
Kosher means something to do with food. That's what most people believe. Kosher, so fit to eat. That's not the meaning of the word kosher. The meaning of the word kosher is it's far more generic, and it applies to other areas of Jewish law outside of kashrus, as in food kashrus. So for example, so lehachshir means to prepare something for use. Okay? Believe it or not, we even use that same word in the laws of tumah. Something is mukhshar lekabel tumah. It can be now ready to be able to become impure. So the word kosher does not relate only to food. It means something is now suited to a particular role. So this food is now suited for me as a Jewish person to be able to eat and serve Hashem through eating it. That's the point. It means it's now suitable for me to serve Hashem. Everybody just thinks if it's kosher food, then it's, it's licensed. If it's kosher food, then the more I eat, surely the more mitzvah it is. No. Kosher means it is now suitable that I could use it to serve Hashem. Machshartoi, same word we're seeing over here, is the Torah makes a person suitable for 4 different types of personality that they could access. But the key word over here is machshartoi, makes the person suitable. The Torah does not turn a person into a tzaddik or a chassid or a yashar or a ne'eman. The Torah just gives us tools, it gives us the resources, it gives us the knowledge base from which we could achieve one of those 4 things. That's really important, and it's along the same lines of what we said before. Malbashtoi, he gives us the clothing, but he doesn't turn us into the person. So this is why I say it's Dvarim Harbe. This is another segment of what the Torah does for us. It makes us beloved to Hashem, that's what it does to us. But this is what it does for us. So now we've got to understand what are these things. Tzaddik, Chassid, Yashar, Ne'eman. 4 different potential categories that a person could achieve. And all the different commentaries give us different perspectives on what these 4 are. So let's start with a tzaddik. We have a big problem with the word tzaddik, unfortunately. What's the big problem that we have with the word tzaddik? Overuse. The biggest problem we have with the word tzaddik is overuse. Oh, you're such a tzaddik. Why? Because you brought me a coffee. You're a tzaddik. In other words, what we've done is, unfortunately, we've cheapened the term. We don't have that problem with yashar and ne'eman. Oh, you're such a yashar. We don't use that expression. So we're more likely to get an accurate translation. Ne'eman. It's, I don't know, how often do we use that expression? Chassid could also be a little bit overused and abused. But probably the most abused term out of all of the 4 is the word tzaddik. So we've got to understand, what does a tzaddik actually mean? And it's something that we could examine on multiple levels, because tzaddik actually appears in different contexts in the Torah with different meanings. So let's try and get to the most basic meaning. What is the shoresh, the grammatical root of the word tzaddik is tzedek. What's tzedek? Justice. So that's really important. For example, tzedakah. Everybody thinks that tzedakah is a really kind, nice thing that we do. So we feel good about ourselves by being so nice. But that's not what tzedakah is. Tzedakah comes from the word tzedek, which is, it's a just thing to do. That means it's fulfilling an obligation when we give tzedakah. There's no opportunity after giving tzedakah to pat ourselves on the back and say, wow, I'm such a kind person. No, that's gemilus chasadim. That's a different story. Tzedakah is mandated. It is an obligation that we discharge by giving the correct amount to tzedakah. And if we don't give the correct amount, then we've actually failed an obligation that we have. So what is a tzaddik? In the simplest understanding of the word tzaddik, is the person who does the things that Hashem expects of them. So the Yachin uses this expression. He says that tzaddik means somebody whose relationship with Hashem is as it should be. That means all of the obligations that I have, all of the requirements that Judaism puts on me, I know that I can say I've discharged those requirements properly. Now, is that the real meaning of the word tzaddik? Is that the ultimate translation? I'd say no. But in the context of what we're learning over here, this is a good enough translation of tzaddik. Because it's not necessarily a guarantee that every single person who learns Torah properly becomes a tzaddik in the ultimate sense of the tzaddik. Because that's an extremely elevated position. We know, for example, that the Gemara uses a very strange expression. Very strange. It says, Ra'a HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'tzadikim shehim mu'atim. That Hashem saw that there were going to be very few tzaddikim. It's such a strange expression. What do you mean he saw? Surely he made the system. He realized that only going to be... So it obviously means that that's the intention. He saw to it. Ra'a HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'tzadikim shehim mu'atim. Hashem saw regarding tzaddikim that they are few. It's not the end of the quotation, by the way. Because the quotation continues, Amad v'shasvan b'chol dor v'dor. So therefore he spread them out across the generations. Because if all the tzaddikim would be concentrated in one generation, we'd have a lot of problems. So he spread it over all of the generations. We're not talking about that level of a tzaddik, that tzaddik yisoid olam, that the entire world is dependent on the tzaddik in order to survive. Here we're talking about tzaddik is the person who does what Hashem expects of them. They discharge their responsibilities properly. Okay? Between us and Hashem. Whereas the Yachin says Yashar. What does Yashar really translate as in our language? Yashar, straight. Another word? Upright. So usually, Yashar is usually a word that we use in Torah with regards to financial matters or with regards to business conduct, because that's where you want somebody who is Yashar, That's usually where we use it. This person has a lot of yosher. They have integrity. They're straight. We know exactly what we're dealing with. And so therefore, according to the Yachin, the Yashar is the one who's kind of, dealing with people, engaging with people in an appropriate way. We'll come back to the Yashar in a second because I did skip over a Chassid. It goes Tzadik, Chassid, Yashar, Ne'eman. So let's talk about a Chassid for a second. What is a Chassid? Well, it depends who you ask. If you ask, the Gemara will tell you one thing. If you ask a Chassid, it might tell you something else. So what is a Chassid according to the Gemara? Chassid is somebody who goes lifnim mishur asadin. That's the definition of a Chassid. Is a person who goes beyond the requirements of the law. So now you can see why it goes tzaddik and then Chassid. Because a tzaddik is somebody who conforms to the letter of the law. Whatever Hashem expects of them, that's what they do. Without failure. Without cutting corners. They fulfill and discharge all of their obligations properly. That's a tzaddik. Whereas a chassid is the person who goes more than what the Torah requires. For example, simple example, we spoke about tzedakah. As far as halacha is concerned, how much is the minimum, or not minimum, how much tzedakah you're supposed to give? 10%, right? Meiser is 10% of a person's earnings. This is not a shir on Meiser, so you can ask your local Orthodox rabbi which earnings. But after, whatever it is, net earnings, that's, you're supposed to give, the halacha requires 10%. What is a chassid? Chassid gives 20%. Now the Rambam says that's the max, that's the ceiling, you can't go beyond that. That's the Rambam, it's not necessarily every view on halacha. But generally speaking, those are the two that we look at. So the tzaddik is the person who follows the letter of the law. The chassid is somebody who goes beyond the letter of the law. But then there's another Gemara about a chassid. And that's the very interesting Gemara about how do you dispose of your nails after you cut your nails. So, Rasha Zorokon. The Gemara says the person who's a wicked person, couldn't care less, they drop their nails on the floor. Okay? Tzaddik, what does a tzaddik do? Tzaddik, koivron. A tzaddik buries the nails. Chassid, sorofon. And a chassid is somebody who burns their nails. Why are we so obsessed with nails? What's the issue over here with nails? So, Tumah. We're told that nails are a part of the body that attract a negative energy and impure energy. And leaving nails lying around where somebody might step on those nails might, God forbid, somehow, I don't know how, obviously spiritual stuff, might bring them some kind of a negative energy. And so therefore, you get rid of the nails. People always talk about pregnant women and nails, but it would seem from the Gemara that it's broader than that. That it's, any person could step on the nail and it could chas v'shalom have some kind of a negative effect. So the Rasha is somebody who couldn't care. So what? I'm not responsible for other people, and that's why they're considered wicked, because they just discard their nails. The tzaddik says we're going to bury the nails. Nobody's going to walk where I've buried it. It will obviously be protected, and that's good enough. And that is the letter of the law. But the chassid, sorofon, the chassid burns the nails. Why does the chassid burn the nails? Because what happens if over the course of time, or because of, I don't know, heavy movement, you only have to look around Joburg and see what happens when you have a whole lot of heavy equipment moving on roads. Right, you get potholes, things move. So maybe the nails will be exposed before they disappear and decompose and who knows what. And so therefore the chassid is not satisfied to bury the nail. The chassid burns the nails. Now that raises a big halachic issue. Is a Jewish person allowed to burn a part of their body? Interesting question, right? Interesting question. Still doesn't change the question. Are we permitted to burn part of our body? No. So, halachically, yes, absolutely, it's not a question, because hair and nails are not considered to be that much part of the body that it's an issue. That's why you can cut them off and discard them, and you can burn them. There's no halachic issue. But spiritually, there is an issue with destroying a part of one's own body. So that means that the chassid is willing to do something that potentially harms them to protect somebody else from them being harmed. That's what we mean by a chassid. So a chassid is somebody who is motivated to do much more than the Torah requires, even to the point that it comes at a cost to themselves. And this is not a financial cost. This means it could actually hurt me, God forbid. That's what a chassid is. Now, where's a person going to get to be motivated to do that? Let's be honest. It's hard enough to be motivated to do what the Torah expects of us, because the Torah has many expectations, and not all of them are easy. So how is a person to be motivated to become a chassid? Somebody who's willing to do so much of what Judaism expects, even to the point that it might actually come at some kind of a cost to themselves, emotional cost, physical cost, health cost, financial cost. How is that even possible? Well, Rabbi Meir told us right at the beginning, When a person is engaged in Torah learning without personal interest, they're not learning Torah to feed themselves. They're learning Torah because this is what Hashem wants. So therefore, their mindset is dedication to Hashem. That person will develop into somebody who's going to conduct themselves in a way, if this is what Hashem wants, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to sit and work out how will it affect me and what's the cost-benefit analysis for myself. So it's actually quite a straight line from Osek B'Torah Lishma to having the attitude of the Chassid, which is quite interesting. The Chassid, in fact, there's another expression about a Chassid, which is brought in Kabbalah, Ezehu Chassid, who is a Chassid, Hamis Chassid im Kain Delay. It's a very unusual expression. The one who shares kindness with his nest. What does that mean? So the explanation that's given is, Kain is a play on words, and it comes from the word koinoi, which is our creator. That means somebody who is completely focused on how do I, quote unquote, do chesed for Hashem, rather than how do I get a benefit for myself. So the person who's learning Torah lishma for the right reasons is likely to become a person who says, I'm going to do this for Hashem's sake. I'm doing it for Kain Delay. I'm doing it for koinoi. I'm doing it for Hashem. It's got nothing to do with what I'll get out of it. It's obviously a very elevated level for a person to achieve.
Is that Kiddush Hashem?
Kiddush Hashem would be an example. The only thing with Kiddush Hashem is that in many instances Kiddush Hashem is a once-off, whereas the Chassid would be doing this on a consistent basis.
Is it the same thing as Shilach HaKain? Like when you do something we don't know why you're doing it, but because Hashem says.
Okay, so Shilach HaKain might be a little bit different because there is an argument why we do Shilach HaKain, right? There are some Mefarshim who say the reason we do Shilach HaKain is to teach us that we should always be conscious of the empathy towards creatures. The same reason we don't shecht two animals on the same day, or a mother and a baby on the same day, right? Not two animals, I'm saying a mother and a baby on the same day. So there are other mitzvahs that are considered complete chukim. So what would motivate a person to actually want to do chukim? You'd have to be dedicated to doing Torah Lishma, and that's why a person would be willing to do the chukim as well. Yeah. Yeah, believe it or not. Believe it or not. There are those, by the way, halachic authorities who say that if you flush your nails down the toilet, it's the equivalent of burning your nails. I don't know if that's across the board, but I've definitely heard that. There certainly are people today who still burn their nails, if you can imagine that. Okay, so let's continue. So then you have Yashar. So we said that Yashar is a person who is straight, right? But Yashar is also a person who is upright. Not a whole lot of commentary actually on the meaning of the word Yashar because it seems to be so straightforward. This is the person who is, what you see is what you get. Yashar, straight up. There's no kunsten, as we say. There's no messing about. There's no trying to do something to gain points or curry favor from people. This somebody just kind of goes on and does what they have to do. Neman is interesting. What's Neman? Neman is somebody who's faithful, somebody who's trustworthy. B'chol beisi nemanhu. That's what Hashem says about Moshe. I can trust him in my whole house. There's homework. Why would Hashem think that you can't trust Moshe in his house? What's he talking about? Okay, subject for another conversation. So, Neman means somebody who is absolutely, what's another word besides faithful or trustworthy? Reliable. That's Neman. Neman, you know that you can absolutely rely upon them. As we say in the mornings, right? What do we say? Rabba emunasecha. Great is your faithfulness. We're talking about Hashem because we know that Hashem is, so to speak, like Old Faithful. You know, every morning is going to put our neshamas back. Every morning the sun's going to come up. That's what Neman means. And so Neman is a person who can be absolutely sure that they will always not just do the same things. That's not Neman. That could just be habit. Neman is that somebody you can be absolutely certain will always be in the same place, meaning the same level of dedication, the same level of integrity, the same level of commitment. That will always be in place.
Could it be reliable?
Reliable. And then let's just throw in the last two that are part of this particular section. It says, Umerachactoi minachet umekoravtoi lidei schus. That this learning of Torah in this very appropriate, dedicated way will keep a person away from Averos and will bring them closer to schus, to merits. What does it mean, keep them away from Averos? What do you mean, keep them away from Averos? Merachato, keep us distant from sin. What does that mean? Two things. The first thing that it means is, there's a pasuk that says that lo ye'une l'tzadik kol oven, that a tzaddik will not slip up into a sin. Won't accidentally do an Avera. There's some magnificent stories that illustrate this point. One of the stories is a particular Hasidic Rebbe who came to a particular person's house, and they brought out this elaborate dinner, and he sat there, and he sat there, and he sat there, and he just wouldn't eat the food. And eventually the butcher comes running and he says, "Oh, I hope you didn't eat the food." And essentially what happened is that during the course of the day, in those days, the butcher shechted as well as sold the meat, and there was an animal that had proven to be treif. This is the real meaning of the word treif. In other words, it had some kind of a medical complication that disqualified it from being kosher, and everything got somehow mixed up. And then when he eventually unpacked it all, he worked out that that piece of meat went to this family, and there was this treif food. And here was the person who, for whatever reason, unbeknownst to himself, just couldn't bring himself to eat the food. So Hashem comes up with ways to keep a person away from doing an Aveira. I'll tell you even a more bizarre story. I believe it was Reb Hillel Paracha, who was also one of the great, he was not a Rebbe, he was a great Chassid of the Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe of Chabad, that he arrived at somebody's house one evening on a Friday night, and somebody had inadvertently lit the candle in his room. And he was bumping into furniture like there was no candle. Like he didn't know that this had happened, but he literally he wasn't able to see in that room. He just wasn't able to see. And afterwards it emerged that somebody had lit this candle on Shabbos. But you know, Hashem protected in it because you're not supposed to have benefit from something that's been done on Shabbos. Bizarre stories like that, right? So, merachakta minachet does not mean that the person is now incapable of sinning. In the same way as it does not mean that the person has integrated humility, or that the person is a tzaddik, chassid, yosher, and eman. The Torah just gives us resources that the average person doesn't have, that protect us, or protects this person who is so dedicated to learning, that merachakto, it doesn't say no sins, merachakto minachet, it keeps us distant from the Aveira, right? Distant from the Aveira. I'll tell you a fascinating story. There was a very, very colorful chassid. He's subject to subject of many, many interesting stories in Hasidic literature. His name was Reb Shmuel Munkus. So, on the face of it, he was like the court jester in the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe's yeshiva. Because he had all these quirky things that he used to do. But on examination, every one of them had very profound messages behind them. So it's one Thursday evening, and all the guys were gathered in somebody's house, and they were having a farbrengen. And it's a cold, cold winter's night, and they're sitting there, and they singing and sharing words, and engaging with each other. And again, the local butcher arrives with a piece of meat to offer them, to fuel the farbrengen. And Reb Shmuel Munkus was responsible to kind of carve it up and serve it to the men. So he walks into the room, and they're in the middle of doing whatever they're doing, and he's carrying this tray of steaming hot beef. And the next thing, he starts doing like this little dance, and he starts dancing around the room. And everybody's, "No, Reb Shmuel, put down the food so we can continue. You're disturbing the farbrengen." And he's doing his thing, kind of traipsing around the room. And eventually, at some point, he goes over to the window, throws the window open, and throws the meat out the window into the snow. And everybody was furious with him. So, for those people who are familiar with how Hasidim used to interact with each other in those days, they took Reb Shmuel, and they lay him down on the table, and they gave him a few claps. The Torah says you're not allowed to waste. Bal tashchis, it's directly against the Torah. You're not allowed to do something like that. What kind of behavior is this? They gave him a few claps, and everybody sat down, and they carried on like nothing had happened. About a half an hour or so later, the butcher comes running in, similar story. "Oh, I hope you didn't eat the meat." What happened? Same story. There was a confusion. This meat, it's not kosher. So what do the Hasidim now do to Reb Shmuel? What do you think? What do you think? They take him, they lie him down on the table, they give him a few more claps. They say, "What do you think? What, you're not a Rebbe. What are you doing these magical tricks and miracles and whatever over here? This is not on. You're not allowed to behave like this." They give him a few more claps. Then after they finished, they said, "Now why did you throw out the meat?" He says, "I don't know. I just saw that you were all engaged in this very spiritual activity, And then when I walked in with the meat, you were so easily distracted, I realized it had to be the Satan. It's not possible that you could come down from such a spiritual high to this hedonism so quickly. There's no way. There had to be something wrong with the meat. Merachakto minachet. Hashem finds ways to keep a person away from doing an Aveira. And Hashem finds ways to give us opportunities to do what is right. The Medrash says that David HaMelech, King David, used to say that there were times where he would walk and he would find himself in the yeshiva. You ever had that experience when you're driving, you find yourself somewhere else?
Yes.
Yeah? So David HaMelech would be walking and he'd find himself in the yeshiva. And he saw that as an indication that Hashem wanted him to be there at that time, to have the schus, to either learn, but more likely to weigh in on an halachic issue that was being raised. Because we know the Gemara famously tells us whenever there was an halachic issue, David HaMelech always came up with the correct halachic outlook. So, does that turn the person into a proper full-blown tzaddik? No. Does it mean the person is completely immune to Averos? No. But it does mean that a person who learns Torah with the right intention, Hashem will create barriers to misbehavior and will create assistance to appropriate behavior. Which is, of course, would be very nice to have, I think.